Is smiling not good for the camera?
Phet, as looking after IDRC's program in India for ITC4D, could you tell us something where it's going now?
Where it's headed now,
Yeah.
we go through 5-year cycles, what we call prospectus development and then 5-year programming. ICT4D program has gone over a decade of the program area, and before that was information sciences. So you can trace that back to 20, 30 years of work in information society issues. IDRC is now shifting gears. The ICT4D programming, which used to be regionally based, there's Pan-Asia in Asia that covers Southeast Asia, South Asia, and East Asia. There was a team called Acacia that focused on Africa, and there was connectivity for Latin America that focused its work in Latin America. That is going to disappear. Not to say that we're no longer working on these issues. A lot of my colleagues will be mainstream, so we'll take sectorial look. For example, e-health will be under health program.
I see.
Agriculture will be under an agricultural program, so e-agriculture. So that work, you could argue that the investment actually is going to increase. And then there will be a small team. I'm lucky enough to belong to that team. It now is going to be a global team instead of these regional teams. And right now it's called Information Network and Inclusion. That may change. And we're looking at issues that somewhat presupposes a world past connectivity. So more on, I think, intellectual property rights issues, issues around rights base, privacy rights, censorship, surveillance of the internet will be. We have a primary focus of the internet as being the medium. We also have another dimension looking at open development. Roughly, the argument is that perhaps open technologies, open collaborative technologies allow us to move towards an open society. So issues around transparency, governance. So one way to look at it is looking at what's happening in Egypt, Tunisia, is a way to that we have certain hypotheses of saying that if communications are open, perhaps social mobilization will happen. What's the litmus test for that? How do we develop research agendas? We have some ideas, but now we're developing a concept around these things. So again, open development being a big component of that, and another area that sort of looks at presupposing a sort of a post-access world, assuming everyone has access. What are the sort of issues? And it tends to be, I think, the rights-based issues.
This is a field that has changed. The field has changed very dramatically. I mean, the connectivity is not an issue. As you were pointing out, free software, open source has become part of the mainstream. So it poses like new challenges.
Yeah, but I think we also have to be cautious. I'm tending to think more that while there's the demand side issues about rights, there's also, you can't take it from the materiality of things, the material culture of the supply side issues. You and I, you mentioned about low cost telephones, for example. We can't, I think, separate the access issues from the post-access world. I think so. There is a transition that we recognize. Right now, we just approved a project with the Center for Internet Society in Bangalore to look at precisely that, the connection between intellectual property rights and the manufacturing of low-cost ICTs. So we're conscious that there isn't a clean separation between access and post-access, but we're moving towards, we're thinking we need to move ahead.
If you had to look back, what would you see as the 3 biggest failures or biggest successes of the ICT4D discourse over the last decade?
That's a tough one. 3. I can start name. I think one of the issues of the development discourse around ICT4D has been that there's this notion that if people have access, that somehow
problems are solved.
There's this digital commons. There's this sort of the humanities knowledge is there, and people have access to it, and therefore, it was always about models of connectivity to the field. Bringing a lab to the field, for example, telecenter movements, where they had major benefits. But I think we have to reevaluate some of those some of that thinking of the global to the local. I'm increasingly thinking that local management of resources, local management of knowledge and production of knowledge is more important. If you look at issues around climate change, and this session where we were talking about markets, there is still that tension of the global and the local, where we know there's continuum, there's a whole spectrum of things. I think ICT for D discourse, there was an element of this assumption that once we connected people,
the golden dawn was here.
The problems will be solved. I don't think it's that case. And I think increasingly we're thinking not about the ICTs per se, but the network society. For me, I think three main areas that ICTs, or the way thinking, for us to think about it, is to leverage network effects, for example, is one. To see where we can reduce information asymmetries in many sectors, and then social mobilization. Those, I think, are three main areas that you could look at how ICTs can be leveraged.
And on the positive side, I mean, what do you see as the successes of the debate, that it managed to give people a sense of optimism, even if it was a bit illusory? Or
no, not to sound all negative. I think there were many positive things that were going on. I think at the moment, I don't know how to explain it. Let me try to explain it this way.
Yeah.
I think there's two things going on simultaneously. One, there is this, I think in the northern discourse, is this feeling of stepping into a medium, that what the internet represents is this super interoperable virtual world to which we step into the frame. It's a medium that isn't like television. Television, and this is a medium which actually step into. So that's the dream. In reality, what simultaneously is going on is we're actually creating a physical frame and stepping backward, right? That's simultaneously happening on. And there are issues that have to be sort of sorted out that way, because it's the reality issues. So on the one hand, the developed world has this dream of entering the medium, and where in reality, what's happening is we're actually creating frames and stepping out. So this sort of mediated, I like to think of sort of digital prosthesis. Literally, for example, let's take voice over IP. Literally now to have voice. Egypt, Tunisia, another example again. If you're going to say social media had a major impact on that, then literally for a citizen of the world to have voice these days, you have to have voice over IP. Internet protocol and internet intellectual properties, and probably other things, but just an example of two layers now just to have voice.
Literacy is not enough, voice is not enough.
The human machine is not enough. The machine human is what we're moving towards, if that makes sense. And so there are benefits towards moving from human machine to machine human, but what are also the trade-offs? For me, you've known me, but I've always been conscious of what are the burdens that we actually put on people.
Right.
Are we saying to people, to have voice now, you have to have a mobile phone?
Otherwise you don't exist?
Otherwise you don't exist in participating this way. So we're moving towards that. So how do we maximize those benefits of networking people, and how do we minimize the burden that we're actually, we're increasingly becoming cyborgs, right? In that way. We need devices, It's not, you and I have the dream of stepping in. Super interoperable world, languages are translatable, your data is connected to my data, but literally what we're actually doing is creating a physical frame, stepping backwards, and imagining that we're stepping in. Two things happening simultaneously. I think understanding that. I think there's the global north has that vision of the stepping in, because it's ubiquitous. My cell phone, my laptop, I'm always stepping into this virtual world.
And the global south?
In the global south, we need to be able to create very cheap, low-cost frames that allows for that, but at minimum burden, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. A lot of food for thought.
Yeah,
yes,
thank
brilliant.
you.